Imagine boarding a first-class flight, looking forward to a peaceful trip, only to be disrespected by the very people who are supposed to make you feel welcome. Walter Bennett, a well-mannered gentleman in his late 70s, stepped onto that plane with nothing but joy in his heart. He was on a mission to surprise his son, Jackson, the pilot of the flight. But by the time the plane touched down, what should have been a heartwarming family moment turned into an upsetting incident that rocked the entire airline. And when Jackson found out what happened to his father, right there at 30,000 feet, you won't believe his reaction. Walter Bennett had lived a full life. He had traveled far and wide, seen beautiful places, and faced many of life's ups and downs. As a retired schoolteacher, he carried himself with quiet pride. Even with his age showing in the slight shake of his hands, his calm presence and kind eyes left a lasting impression on those who met him. On this particular day, Walter was especially excited. He had planned a surprise for his son, Jackson, who had worked so hard to become a pilot. Jackson's love for flying started in their small hometown in Louisiana, where he used to watch planes take off from the local airport. Years of dedication had finally paid off, and he was now living his dream. Walter decided to celebrate that success by booking a first-class seat on one of Jackson's flights. He wanted to see his son in action, if only from a distance, and surprise him once they landed. Dressed in a dark blue suit, Walter looked sharp and carried himself with grace. As he waited to board his flight at Denver International Airport, his eyes sparkled with excitement. The terminal was full of people coming and going, and Walter quietly made his way to the gate, ticket in hand. The flight attendants at the gate welcomed him with polite smiles, and soon he was seated comfortably in first class. The cabin felt luxurious, soft leather seats, cozy blankets, and gentle music playing in the background. Walter looked around, soaking in the surroundings. He felt proud of what Jackson had achieved. Even though he was flying first class, Walter didn't expect any special attention. He just wanted a simple, smooth flight and a little glimpse into the world his son was now part of. Shortly after he got settled, a young flight attendant walked over. Her uniform was neat, and her name tag read, Lizzie. She approached with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, sir," she said kindly. "Can I get you anything before we take off?" "A little water, if you don't mind," Walter said with a polite nod of thanks. Lizzie smiled and went to get it. While she was gone, another flight attendant came down the aisle. This one was nothing like Lizzie. His name was Tom, tall, broad-shouldered, and stiff-faced. He looked at Walter in a way that made him feel out of place. As Walter shifted in his seat to get more comfortable, he couldn't help but notice Tom's lingering stare. There was a clear look of disapproval on his face, thin, quiet, but unmistakable. Just then, Lizzie returned with the water. Walter thanked her again and took a slow sip, but he could feel the mood in the cabin had changed. Tom was still watching from across the aisle, and his cold stare sent a chill down Walter's spine. Walter tried to shake it off. He reminded himself why he was there, to enjoy the flight and look forward to the special moment he had planned with his son. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Walter leaned back, glancing out the window with a quiet smile. The soft rumble of the engines relaxed him, and his thoughts drifted to Jackson. He pictured his son's face, full of surprise and joy when they met after landing. Walter knew it would be a moment they'd both treasured. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, soaking in the feeling of anticipation. But that peaceful moment didn't last. Tom was back, moving down the aisle, checking on passengers. Walter noticed something that made his stomach tighten. Every other person in first class was greeted with smiles, friendly questions, and kind attention. But when Tom got to Walter's seat, his whole demeanor changed. He looked straight past him, didn't say a word, and kept walking. Walter noticed, but said nothing. He told himself maybe it was just a mistake. A few minutes later, another flight attendant came over. She was blonde, with a forced kind of cheer in her voice. Her name tag read, Katie. She was handing out snacks, going from row to row with the usual offers. But when she reached Walter, something odd happened. Her hand stopped mid-motion like she was unsure whether to even ask. "Would you like a snack, sir?" she asked, her voice polite but stiff. Then she added, "We have a few options, but I'm not sure they'll all be to your taste." Walter caught a quick look she gave him, followed by a faint, almost hidden smirk. And for the first time since boarding, a quiet sense of unease settled over him. The tone was quiet, but the message was clear. Walter didn't answer right away. He took a moment to read Katie's expression. Then, keeping his voice steady and calm, he said, "I'll take whatever you have." Katie handed him a small snack packet, and as she turned to walk away, he caught a quick roll of her eyes. Walter stayed silent but felt the eyes of a few nearby passengers on him. They had clearly noticed what happened. Leaning back in his seat, he tried to convince himself it was nothing. Maybe Katie was just having a rough day. Maybe he was reading too much into it. But as the flight went on, little things kept happening. Small moments that started to form a pattern. At one point, Walter politely asked Katie if he could have a blanket. She paused and glanced at Tom. He gave her a barely there nod, like he was giving silent permission. It was quick, barely noticeable, but it left a mark. Every exchange felt a little cold, a little off, like he wasn't quite welcome there. Walter thought about speaking up, but something inside him said not to. Later, as Katie prepared to serve meals, she looked over at him. There was a flicker in her eyes, something between fake concern and quiet mockery. "You might want to be careful with the lunch trays," she said with a tight smile. "Wouldn't want to mess up that nice suit." Walter's jaw clenched slightly, but he kept his cool. He had been raised to stay respectful, to treat people with kindness, and to let small things go. But this wasn't just a moment of bad service. The looks, the body language, the carefully chosen words. This felt pointed, personal. Walter couldn't help but wonder, was it because of how he looked? His age? Or something else entirely? He turned to the window, searching for peace in the view outside. But the excitement he had felt at the start of the flight was beginning to fade. Now, there was a weight in his chest. A quiet discomfort that didn't go away. He tried to focus on the thought of seeing Jackson at the end of the flight. That reunion, that surprise, was still waiting. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the soft sounds of clinking glasses and quiet conversations filled the cabin, and Walter sat still, hoping the meal service would come and go without any more issues. Surrounded by soft chatter and the hum of the engines, Walter took a deep breath, trying to ease the tension building inside him. He focused on the rhythm of the flight, the familiar sounds that once brought comfort. His thoughts turned again to Jackson. He pictured his son in that pilot uniform, proud and composed. That image gave him strength. This flight, Walter reminded himself, was only part of the journey. The real moment, the reunion, was waiting at the end. Not long after, Katie and Tom began making their way down the aisle with the meal cart. Walter watched as each passenger ahead of him was treated with care. Trays were placed gently, and the crew shared polite, even cheerful conversation. The delicious scent of roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, and a light soup filled the air. But as soon as Katie reached Walter's row, her attitude changed. The forced smile was back. Her lips were tight, her expression cold. "Here you go, sir," she said, holding the tray in an odd, awkward way, right above his head, instead of the normal handoff. Before Walter had a chance to adjust his hands, Katie turned her wrist sharply. The tray tipped, and in a split second, a hot pasta dish with sauce came crashing down, right onto Walter's head. The food spilled over his shoulders, dripping onto his shirt and soaking into the collar of his suit. "Oh dear," Katie said in a flat voice that lacked any real concern. Her lips curled slightly into a smile, one she didn't bother to hide. "I'm so sorry, sir. Looks like I'm a bit clumsy today." Walter sat still, stunned. The warmth of the food was nothing compared to the sting of what had just happened. He had spent decades teaching young people how to stay strong in the face of trouble, but this moment, it was hard. It wasn't just messy. It felt deliberate. Still, Walter kept his voice even. "Could you bring me a napkin?" he asked. Calmly but clearly, he looked her directly in the eyes. Katie's smile didn't fade. "We seem to be out, unfortunately," she said, still wearing that same fake sympathy. She turned back to the cart and continued down the aisle without saying another word. Walter reached into his pocket and pulled out his own handkerchief, quietly trying to wipe the sauce off his suit. He noticed other passengers nearby watching the scene unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, others gave him sympathetic glances. A few whispered to one another, but no one said a word aloud. Across the aisle, he saw Tom standing with his arms crossed, staring at him with a hard, unreadable expression. Walter swallowed hard, feeling the tightness in his throat, but he refused to lower his head. He reminded himself why he was there. This trip was for Jackson. No matter how uncomfortable things had gotten, seeing his son again made it all worthwhile. Still, beneath his calm exterior, a quiet anger was starting to grow. It mixed with the embarrassment of what had just happened, leaving a heavy feeling in his chest. The rest of the meal service came and went without any more trouble, but the mood had already changed. What once felt like a peaceful first-class cabin now felt cold and closed off. Each glance, each movement, felt like it carried an edge. Walter stayed quiet. He slowly dabbed the remaining sauce from his collar. Trying to maintain his composure, he told himself he would stay silent until the flight ended. He had been through worse. and he knew that getting into anything mid-flight would only make things worse. Oh, he kept his gaze steady, looking out the small window, focusing on the sky ahead. The thought of seeing Jackson again helped him stay grounded. That moment, he told himself, would wash this experience away. Finally, after what felt like hours, the captain's voice came over the speaker, announcing they were starting their descent. Walter let out a long breath. He felt both relieved and drained. All he could think about now was the moment he would finally get to hug his son. It was the one good thing he held onto through the discomfort of the trip. He did his best to smooth out his now-stained suit jacket, telling himself Jackson wouldn't care. He'd just be happy to see his dad as the plane touched down and slowly rolled toward the gate. Walter felt a sense of peace start to return. He stayed in his seat as the other first-class passengers gathered their things and filed out. He noticed Katie and Tom standing near the front, exchanging looks and chatting casually. Their body language was relaxed, almost satisfied, like the flight had gone exactly the way they wanted. Walter didn't react. He stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and picked up his small carry-on bag. He started walking toward the exit with quiet confidence, refusing to let either of them see any sign of disappointment. But just as he reached the doorway, a voice stopped him. "Dad!" Walter turned around. Standing just a few feet away was Jackson, his son, in full pilot uniform. Jackson's face lit up, filled with both surprise and happiness. Jackson's smile quickly disappeared when he noticed the state of his father's suit. The sauce stains on his collar and the weary look in his eyes spoke volumes. "Dad, what happened?" Jackson asked, his voice quiet but filled with concern. He glanced around, noticing the tension. Before Walter could say anything, Tom appeared behind Jackson. When Tom saw who Jackson was, his face drained of color. He realized that Jackson was the son of the man he had just mistreated. Katie, too, stopped in her tracks, her smile fading as she saw what had happened. Jackson's gaze went from his father to the two flight attendants. His expression grew hard as he put the pieces together. "Did you two treat my father like this?" His voice was cold, filled with disbelief and anger. Katie stammered, her face turning red. We didn't know he was your father." "It was an accident, sir." Jackson's eyes narrowed as he repeated, "An accident?" His voice was low but intense. "Accidents happen, but the way you look right now doesn't seem like an accident. It looks like you knew exactly what you were doing." He stepped forward, his stance firm and commanding. "I trusted this airline to treat every passenger with respect. But you treated my father like this? I can't even imagine how you treat other passengers." Walter, who had stayed quiet until now, gently placed a hand on Jackson's shoulder, trying to calm him. "Son, it's okay," he murmured, his voice soft, though his eyes were tired. "I'm here now. That's all that matters." But Jackson shook his head. "No, Dad. It's not okay. This behavior isn't acceptable, no matter who you are." He turned toward Tom and Katie, his voice steady but firm. "I'll be speaking to management about this. It will be investigated, and you both will be held responsible." Katie opened her mouth to argue, but one look from Jackson silenced her. She lowered her eyes, her face a mix of shame and discomfort. Tom kept his stern expression, but even he seemed to lose some of his confidence. Jackson then turned back to his father, his tone softening. "Come on, Dad. Let's get you cleaned up." As they walked through the airport, Walter felt a warmth in his chest. Walter felt a deep sense of pride not just for Jackson but also for the unwavering support his son had shown. This wasn't just about a flight that went wrong. It was about standing up for dignity, making things right, and treating everyone with respect, no matter their background or where they came from. They arrived at the airline office, where Jackson took charge, calmly explaining what had happened to the management. Walter sat quietly, watching his son handle the situation with professionalism and determination. It was a reminder of all the values Walter had worked to instill in him. After reporting the incident, Jackson stayed by his father's side as the airline staff began looking into what had happened. Walter observed how Jackson's focus never wavered. It was clear that this wasn't just about filing a complaint. It was about holding people accountable for their actions. The management seemed uncomfortable as Jackson spoke. They listened closely, hearing every word of the calm yet firm account Jackson gave of the flight attendant's behavior. Mr. Harlan, the senior supervisor, a man with gray hair and a serious face, took notes as Jackson spoke. "I sincerely apologize, Mr. Bennett, for the way you were treated on your flight. This behavior is completely unacceptable under any circumstances." Jackson's response was measured but firm. "Apologies are fine, but what matters now is action. Passengers should never be treated with disrespect, especially by those who are supposed to ensure their comfort and safety." This is about basic decency." Mr. Harlan cleared his throat, clearly uneasy. "You have my word, Captain Bennett. This will be dealt with. I'll personally ensure that both attendants, Katie and Tom, are suspended while we conduct a full investigation. They'll also face disciplinary actions, which could include retraining or termination, depending on what we find." Sitting next to his son, Walter gave a small nod of gratitude to Mr. Harlan. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice steady but weary, Walter spoke, "I appreciate your understanding." Mr. Harlan took a deep breath, offering a sincere but regretful smile. "Mr. Bennett, I assure you, we hold our employees to the highest standards. Your experience has shown us that we need to do more to reinforce those standards." With the formalities out of the way, Jackson and Walter left the office. As they walked through the airport, Jackson turned to his father. "Dad, I'm so sorry this happened. I thought the values I helped bring to the airline would show in every flight, in every crew member." Walter placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "You don't have to apologize, Jackson. This isn't on you. The important thing is that you were there, standing up for what's right." Jackson looked at him, his expression softening. "You always taught me that everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are. I just hope by addressing this, we're helping make sure others are treated with the respect they deserve." As they made their way out of the terminal, the tension between them began to fade. They shared a quiet moment, both knowing that, as unpleasant as the experience had been, it had brought them closer. They left the airport feeling grateful for each other and hopeful that the change they started would reach beyond them, helping others along the way. Few weeks passed since the flight that had unexpectedly shifted both Walter and Jackson's perspectives. Life returned to its normal pace, but the memory of that day stayed with them, weaving itself into the fabric of their relationship and their daily lives. For Walter, the experience had been a sharp reminder of the biases that exist in the world, how they often show up in places meant to be neutral, like an airplane cabin. He found himself reflecting on the events not with bitterness, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Despite his age, Walter believed in the power of change and knew that what his son had done that day had sparked something bigger. One morning, Walter received a letter in the mail from the airline. Inside, there was a handwritten note from Mr. Harlan. The supervisor, who had met with Walter and Jackson after the flight, sent a letter that day. It apologized sincerely but also shared some important news. The letter explained that the airline was making changes in response to what Walter had experienced. It detailed a new series of training sessions focused on empathy, respect, and anti-bias practices. These sessions would be mandatory for all flight attendants and staff members across the airline. The letter also mentioned that Tom and Katie had been suspended while their behavior was being reviewed. It assured Walter that all employees would go through additional training to make sure something like this never happened again. As Walter read the letter, a wave of relief washed over him. This wasn't just an empty apology. It was real action. The airline was stepping up, committing to a higher standard of accountability. Walter hoped this would prevent others from going through the same kind of mistreatment he had faced. Later that afternoon, Jackson stopped by. Walter handed him the letter, and as his son read it, his expression softened with a mix of pride and relief. "Dad, this means a lot," Jackson said quietly. "It's the first step toward making sure everyone who flies with us feels respected." Walter nodded, his voice calm but firm. "You know, son, I was angry that day. Not just at them, but at the idea that they thought they could get away with it. But what you did, standing up like that, it reminded me that we can always make change, one step at a time." Jackson looked at his father, determination shining in his eyes. "And we will, Dad. We'll keep pushing for it." The two of them sat quietly for a moment, understanding each other without words. They were both committed to a future where dignity and respect were the standard, not the exception. As they looked out at the sky, Walter felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Despite everything, he believed the world could still change for the better.